Hi everyone, and welcome back to a new video. Some of you I know that may be wondering like, Elena, ¿por qué estás hablando español? To what I answered that I made a poll a few days ago on my Instagram where I asked if you wanted to have a video in English, and the 80% of people said that they wanted. So here I am, doing a video in English to what I genuinely ask. Please have patience with my sort of broken English. I'm not a native speaker of English, despite that I have been studying since I was 3 years old. I still have a lot of trouble with speaking. Therefore, I'm speaking very slowly, trying to do it as calmly as I can so you can all understand me. So please bear with me. This is not my native language, so please, I hope that all of you can understand me without any problems. Okay, so as you can see, my makeup is kind of extravagant. It is very Halloweeny, and it is because I am going to explain the horror genre. I know, I'm excited because I'm a huge fan of horror movies. Not so much in books because I haven't read it that much, but still, despite that, I'm just gonna talk about the horror genre in literature. I don't know how to say it, but despite that, I really like horror movies. So even if I'm just gonna talk about horror in books, I'm still excited because I love it. Yeah. Okay. Let's calm down. And without further ado, let's start. Okay, so stories with a scary setting that make you crumble in fear have been since forever. Not only in movies, in theater, in books, in bedtime stories, they've always been there. But why? And well, we're not gonna really talk about the why. I wish I could, but I will have to do a lot more investigation, and I don't want to do it right now. But still, how it all started, it's really interesting, and that will be one of the 4 parts of this video. We'll focus on how it started and when, also in what is horror, in, well, not only literature, but what is horror in general. Also see the biggest authors of this genre and some of the most famous books of horror. And lastly, we'll be discussing also the subgenres of horror, the types of horror at the end. So those will be the 4 parts of this video. What is, how and when it started, who are the biggest, most important authors and books, and what types of horrors there is. Those will be the parts that we'll be focusing today. Okay, so the first part, what is horror? According to the Royal Academy of the Spanish Language, or RAE, for all of you that are native Spanish people, they say that horror is a piece of fiction that causes fear and anguish to their audience or readers. It's a pretty generic definition, if you ask me. Like, it's like a circle. It doesn't say that much, but it's what it is. I mean, I have to be honest with you. I don't really like dictionaries that much. I mean, they work a lot. Sometimes I really don't know what a word means, and the dictionary give me the answer. But these circle-like definitions are like, seriously? You couldn't do a less obvious one? Like, but it's what it is. Okay, so this part. This is the part where I am most excited about. I don't know about you, but I love history. Like, seriously, history is so fascinating. In my university, I have taken some courses on history, and they are just so incredible. Like, it's mind-blowing. All of that you can learn about something. So I'm really excited about this part because it is the history of horror. So really excited. Well, as I told you at the beginning, horror stories that are scary, that are meant to frighten the audience or the reader, have been since the beginning of time. But these stories, like, specifically targeted to fear the audience, started, or we have the record that it started more at the ancient Greeks, the ancient Greece. In the Greek Empire, there were many myths and legends and tragedy theater stories that had evolved around the topic of death, vengeance, and what is morality. These stories were very popular, especially at the party of Dionysus, the god of the wine. He had a special party that lasted around 2 weeks, maybe more. I'm not quite sure right now. But these parties had a special segment that presented theater plays that were tragedies. These stories were meant to cause a catharsis. That's how I think you say it in English. I'm not sure. In Spanish it's catharsis, simple. Catharsis, just that. But in English I think it says very similar, like catharsis. But okay, these stories were meant to be morally anguished. They caused pain in the audiences in order to purge their evilness away, their sins against the gods away, and have them cleansed. It is not really like a type of action that would be encouraged in our modern times, but the Greeks were weird. And it's still fascinating, but weird. They made the bar where a lot of horror stories checked if they were being scary, fearsome enough. And that lasted around centuries. Up until the 19th century, where the modern horror began. In 1818, at only 21 years old, I mean, a child, the incredible, amazing writer Mary Shelley published Frankenstein. This story created the modern horror, and a lot of people, brainy people that discuss critics, that is, a lot of critics say that Mary Shelley is the mother of modern horror and the mother of science fiction. I mean, she was a genius. Mary Shelley presented a monster that wasn't God-made. It wasn't made by the gods to confront humanity. This monster was man-made, and she even asks the question, who is the real monster? Is it the creation or is it the creator? She made a horror that wasn't that wasn't bounded to destiny. It was more philosophical. You had to ask the question. It was more psychological horror. Those are the beginnings of horror, of the horror genre. It started more like a way to purge your sins away, up to a horror that makes you question who is the monster, what is to be evil, how can something be so scary. That is the whole path in a very short way to say it, how horror genre started. Next topic. Who were and still are some of the most famous authors and most famous books? On the ancient Greece, we have Euripides, who wrote the play Hippolytus, who tells the really gruesome story about this prince who, because he didn't fall for Aphrodite, he was cursed, and even more, he was really, really cursed because he made a pact with the goddess Artemis to have a chastity vow forever. So Aphrodite just cursed him. Seriously, the Greeks were weird. Like, seriously weird. But okay, another famous Greek author is Aeschylus. He wrote the only preserved trilogy of tragedies, and that, well, it's a story that is divided in 3 parts, trilogy, and it's the only one that it's left behind, that it's left alive, because a lot of them have been lost in time. A lot of plays, a lot of writing was lost at the burning of the Alexandria Library. But lucky for us, we still have Aeschylus write tragedies. It's really hard to think in English, but I think I'm doing a pretty good job. Let's jump again up until the 18th century. In this century, the Goth era started. And I don't mean Goth like we know Goth now. It was a different kind of Goth. But in this century, a more modern horror started, but still not quite like settled. It was the beginnings. In this century, Horace Walpole, yes, Horace Walpole, Horace Walpole published The Castle of Otranto. I don't have a lot to say about this book because I haven't read it, but if this video has more than 20 thumbs up, I'll look it up and I'll read it. I really think that I'm gonna regret it, but hey, I'm up to a challenge. As I said it before, Mary Shelley in the 19th century established the modern horror as it is. She's the mother. But she's not the only author. In this century, we have books such as The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. We have Dracula by Bram Stoker. The many short stories by Edgar Allan Poe. On the 20th century, there was like a boom of horror. Many books of horror were published, and I'm pretty sure that on this short list that I'm gonna say, I'm not gonna cover not even half of the most famous horror books that were published on the 1900s. But here are some. On the 20th century was published The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. P. Lovecraft brought us the myth of 𝚂𝚘𝚌𝚒𝚘𝚏. That is another word that I don't know how to say. But we also have books that were also made into a movie. A lot of these famous books were made into a movie, such as Psycho. We also have The Silence of the Lambs, we have Carrie, and a lot of other Stephen King's books. And we also have An Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice. Now, since the 21st century is still not over, I'm just gonna say some of the books that are most famous and were published through from the 2000s up to 2019, that bridge of time. From the 2000s, we have books such as We Need to Talk About Kevin, Terror by Dan Simmons, and A Head Full of Ghosts. As you can see, there are many famous books and plays that are from the horror genre. Although the tragedies of the ancient Greece are in like two categories of genres. They are both tragedy, but they are also very gruesome, so they can kind of be considered as horror. They are more in a gray area. But let's start the final chapter. Subgenres of the horror genre. These subtypes of horror, they are meant to captivate every single reader. I mean, a different type of reader there. We have subtypes such as goth, paranormal, occultist, we have fantasy horror, we have science fiction, we have survival horror, dystopian, we have slasher. There are so many options that maybe one day they will be endless. Maybe. Unlikely, but maybe. And, well, that is all with the video. Did you know this much about horror? Because up until I decided to make this video, I certainly did not. But well, that's the end of this video. If you like it, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed to the channel, I invite you to subscribe. I post sometimes, but you can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter, although I still don't know how to use Twitter. It's weird, like you just type your thoughts. And I'm still not sure how to use Twitter, but I have it if you sometimes want to read my tweets. I really hope that you liked this video, that you were able to understand my English. I really hope so, because I tried to talk slowly and calmly enough for you to understand what I was saying. But still, thank you. And I have a final question for you in this video, and you can also give me an answer on the comments. And it is, what is your favorite horror book? For me, I would say that it's Frankenstein, because I just love Mary Shelley. I don't know if you can see it when I was talking about her in the video, because she's just incredible. But that's all. I hope to see you on the next time. Bye!